When I first encountered this painting, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me, not from across the gallery, but from within the canvas itself. There's something deeply unsettling about the way a single enormous eye peers down from the mountainside, fixed on a figure so vulnerable she remains completely unaware of the gaze upon her. The painting you're looking at was created by Odilon Redon, a French artist who spent his career exploring the darkest corners of human imagination. While his contemporaries were painting sunlit gardens and bustling cafes, Redon was crafting visions that seemed to emerge from dreams, or perhaps nightmares. This particular work, known as the Cyclops, represents one of his most haunting achievements. What makes this painting so profoundly disturbing isn't just what it shows, but what it suggests. Here we have a scene that appears almost pastoral at first glance. A sleeping figure nestled among flowers on a hillside. But then you notice the eye. That massive, unblinking eye, watching from above the ridge, belonging to a being so large that only his head and shoulders are visible over the mountain itself. This is no ordinary painting. But as we look closer over the next 20 minutes or so, we discover details that transform this from merely strange into something far more psychologically disturbing. There's blood on his lips, subtle but unmistakable. The eye isn't looking at the sleeping woman, it's looking directly at you. The myth this depicts ends in brutal murder, and other artists painting this same story showed her as a powerful goddess. Redon chose to paint her as utterly defenseless. Each of these discoveries adds another layer of unease. Each one answers the question differently. Why is this painting so unsettling? Over the next 20 minutes or so, we'll explore that question from every angle, uncovering details most viewers miss, examining the dark mythology behind the image, and confronting uncomfortable truths about watching and being watched. What we're about to discover will change the way you see this painting forever. One of the first things you'll notice as you examine this painting more carefully is the Cyclops' eye. But what you might not immediately realize is where that eye is actually looking. It's not focused on Galatea, the sleeping woman below. It's looking directly at you, the viewer. This detail transforms everything about the painting. The Cyclops has turned his attention away from his supposed object of desire and locked his gaze onto whoever stands before the canvas. There's something almost playful in his expression. That slight suggestion of a smile, as if he's been caught in the act and is acknowledging it with a kind of knowing glance. "You caught me," he seems to say, "but I'm not stopping." The eye itself occupies roughly a third of his visible head, disproportionately large even for a giant. Redon painted it with extraordinary care. The iris holds depths that seem to shift as you look at them. There's a quality to it that makes the Cyclops appear more alive than any figure rendered in mere paint should be. This isn't the distant, unfocused gaze of someone lost in observation. It's direct. It's conscious. It's uncomfortably aware of your presence. What makes this so unsettling is the power dynamic it creates. We came to observe the painting. We expected to be the watchers, safely examining a scene from mythology, but Redon has reversed that relationship. Suddenly, we're the ones being observed. The Cyclops sees us seeing him, and that recognition creates a connection we never asked for. The technique Redon used contributes to this effect. He worked in pastel and oil, layering them to create an unusual luminosity in the eye. There's a glow to it, a sense of consciousness behind the pigment. The pupil seems to hold genuine depth, as if you could fall into it if you look too long. But perhaps what's most disturbing is what this direct gaze implies. The Cyclops isn't ashamed of his watching. He's not concerned about being discovered. That slight smile suggests he finds this amusing. He's been watching Galatea in secret, yes. But now that you've arrived, now that you've caught him, he's simply turned his attention to you. He's made you part of this scene. You're no longer a neutral observer. You've become another participant in whatever is happening here on this hillside. And once you notice where the eye is looking, you can never unsee it. Every time you return to this painting, you'll feel that gaze lock onto you again, waiting, watching, acknowledging your presence with that same unsettling recognition. There's another detail in this painting that most viewers miss on their first encounter, something that changes our understanding of what we're looking at. Look closely at the Cyclops' mouth. Around his lips, there's a subtle reddish staining. It's not dramatic, it's not obvious. But once you see it, you can't ignore it. It looks like blood. This detail is easy to overlook because Redon painted it with such restraint. The rest of the Cyclops' face is rendered in earth tones, browns and ochres that blend into the rocky mountainside. But around the mouth there's a distinct shift, a deeper red, a staining that suggests something has been consumed. The question becomes unavoidable. What has he been eating? This single detail transforms our reading of the entire scene. The Cyclops isn't just watching Galatea with innocent fascination. He's watching her with the eyes of something that has already tasted blood. This isn't his first hunt. This isn't even his first kill. The calm expression on his face becomes so much more disturbing when you notice the blood. There's no rage here, no obvious violence. Just patient watching combined with the evidence of past violence. It's the expression of a predator who knows exactly what he's doing. Who has done this before? What makes this even more unsettling is the contrast. The scene should be pastoral. Beautiful flowers surround Galatea. The colors are soft, almost dreamlike, but that blood around the Cyclops' mouth injects a note of horror into what could have been a romantic image. Redon didn't need to paint the Cyclops with fangs bared or mouth open in a threatening grimace. The subtle suggestion of blood is far more effective. It tells us everything we need to know about the danger Galatea is in, while maintaining the deceptive calm of the overall composition. This is a creature that has killed before, and he's watching his next victim sleep. Now let's consider the Cyclops' position in this composition. He's not standing openly on the mountain. He's not making his presence known. He's hiding. Look at how carefully he's positioned himself. Only his head and shoulders are visible above the ridgeline. The rest of his massive body is concealed behind the mountain itself. He's chosen his vantage point with precision. From this position, he can observe Galatea without being seen by her. He has a perfect view of her sleeping form while remaining completely hidden. This isn't accidental watching, this is calculated. This is stalking. The way Redon painted the Cyclops' body blending into the mountain makes this even more unsettling. His skin takes on the texture and color of the rock itself. Browns, ochres, the same earth tones that make up the mountainside. He's not just hiding behind the mountain, he's becoming part of it, camouflaging himself into the landscape. This raises an uncomfortable question. How many times has Galatea come to this hillside unaware that she's being observed? How many times has the Cyclops taken up this exact position, watching her from his concealed perch? This feels practiced, rehearsed, the action of someone who has done this many times before. There's something deeply disturbing about this kind of patient, calculated observation. If the Cyclops was simply stumbling upon Galatea by accident, there might be some innocence to it. But this hiding, this deliberate concealment, this careful positioning for the perfect view while remaining unseen, this is predatory behavior. The mountain itself becomes complicit in this act. It provides the perfect hiding spot. It shields the Cyclops from discovery, while giving him an elevated position from which to watch. The natural landscape has become a tool for stalking. And Galatea, sleeping peacefully below, has no idea. She cannot see what we can see. She doesn't know that the mountain above her has eyes, that the landscape itself is watching her with conscious intent. The Cyclops has turned nature into his accomplice. And that makes this scene so much more than just a giant watching a woman. It's about the violation of a space that should be safe, about danger hiding in plain sight, camouflaged as part of the natural world. Now let's turn our attention to Galatea herself, the sleeping figure who remains completely unaware of the watching presence above her. What's immediately striking about how Redon painted her is her utter vulnerability. She's sleeping, eyes closed, defenseless. Her pose is relaxed, almost fetal. One arm rests near her face. Her body is completely exposed to whatever might be watching from above. But there's something else happening here that makes this even more unsettling. Look at the flowers surrounding her. They're not simply growing near her, appear to be growing from her, emerging from her skin, as if she's becoming part of the landscape itself. Her pale flesh seems to merge with the flowery hillside. The boundary between her body and the earth is blurring. This visual metaphor is deeply troubling. Galatea isn't just sleeping in nature, she's being absorbed by it, claimed by it. The earth itself is consuming her slowly while she remains unconscious, and this connects directly to the threat above. The Cyclops has made himself one with the mountain, camouflaging his body into the rock. Now we see Galatea being pulled into the landscape as well, but in a completely different way. Where the Cyclops chose his merger with nature as a hunting strategy, Galatea's absorption is happening to her without her knowledge, without her consent. She's being transformed into something static, something rooted, something that cannot escape. The flowers that grow around and through her might look beautiful at first glance, but they're binding her. They're making her part of the fixed landscape. And that landscape is dominated by the watching presence of the Cyclops, who has positioned himself as the mountain itself. There's no escape route visible in this composition. Galatea is nestled into the hillside, surrounded by vegetation, being slowly absorbed. Even if she woke, even if she somehow sensed the danger above her, where would she go? The landscape that seemed so pastoral, so peaceful, has become a trap. Her sleeping pose emphasizes this helplessness. She's not just unaware, she's incapable of awareness in this moment, defenseless against whatever forces are acting upon her. The watching from above, the absorption from below. Redon has painted a victim who doesn't even know she's a victim yet. And that might be the most unsettling element of all. The complete absence of any defensive posture, any awareness, any ability to protect herself from what's coming. She sleeps. The flowers claim her, the mountain watches, and she knows nothing. To understand why this painting is so deeply disturbing, we need to understand who this giant actually is, what he's capable of, what he's done before. The Cyclops in this painting is Polyphemus, a figure from Greek mythology who appears in multiple ancient texts. And when you know his story, when you understand what kind of creature is doing this watching, the painting becomes infinitely more terrifying. In Homer's Odyssey, Polyphemus is not a gentle giant with romantic longings. He's a monster, a cannibal who traps Odysseus and his men in his cave and proceeds to eat them alive. Homer describes the scene with brutal clarity. Polyphemus seizes two of the men and dashes their heads against the rocks of his cave. Then he tears them apart and devours them raw, like a mountain lion with fresh kill. He gnaws on their bones, he drinks their blood, and he does this methodically, casually, while the remaining men watch in horror. This happens not once, but repeatedly. Morning and evening, Polyphemus takes two more men, kills them, eats them, with no more thought than your eye might give to a meal. This is the creature watching Galatea sleep, not some misunderstood giant with gentle feelings, not a tragic figure worthy of sympathy, a documented murderer. A cannibal who has shown no moral restraint, no hesitation about killing and consuming human beings. But the story of Polyphemus and Galatea doesn't end with watching, it ends with murder. In Ovid's Metamorphoses, we learn what happens when Polyphemus's obsession is rejected, when the object of his watching chooses someone else. Galatea is a sea nymph, beautiful and desired by many, but she's in love with Acis, a young shepherd, a mortal, someone kind and gentle, everything the Cyclops is not. Polyphemus knows about Acis. He's been watching long enough to see them together, to witness their affection for each other. And it drives him into a rage that has been building through all those patient hours of secret observation. One day he finds them together, Galatea and Acis, embracing by the shore. And Polyphemus can no longer contain himself. He rips an enormous boulder from the mountainside, not a rock, a boulder, a piece of the mountain itself, and he hurls it down at Acis with all his strength. The boulder crushes Acis instantly, buries him, ends him. There's no escape, no chance to run. One moment Acis is alive holding Galatea, the next moment he's gone. Destroyed by the jealous rage of the watching giant, Galatea can do nothing but watch her lover die. Can do nothing but flee into the sea, using her power as a water nymph to escape. She transforms Acis's blood into a river, giving him a kind of immortality, but he's still gone, still murdered. This is what the watching leads to. This is where patient observation and unrequited desire end when the watcher is Polyphemus. And suddenly, Redon's painting takes on a completely different meaning. This isn't just a scene of watching, this is the moment before tragedy, the calm before the murder, the stalking phase that will inevitably lead to violence. Galatea sleeps peacefully now, unaware, but in the mythology, that peace doesn't last, cannot last, because the creature watching her from the mountain is the same creature who will kill the man she loves, who will destroy her happiness out of jealousy and rage. Redon chose to paint this moment, not the violence, not the aftermath, the watching, the waiting. The moment when everything still seems peaceful and pastoral, but when the threat is already present, already patient, already planning. In some ways, this is more disturbing than showing the actual murder, because it's the moment when Galatea still has everything, when Acis is still alive, when tragedy hasn't yet struck. But the Cyclops is already watching, and we know what comes next. To understand just how disturbing Redon's vision is, it helps to see how other artists approach this same mythological subject, because the choice to show Polyphemus as calm and hidden rather than obviously threatening was deliberate and deeply unsettling. Let's look at how Annibale Carracci painted Polyphemus roughly 3 centuries earlier, in the late 1500s. Carracci's Cyclops is unmistakably dangerous. He's massive, muscular, aggressive in his pose. He holds a boulder in his hands, clearly about to throw it. His body language screams threat. There's no ambiguity here, no question about what kind of creature this is or what he's capable of doing. When you look at Carracci's version, you know immediately to be afraid. The danger is explicit. The violence is imminent. It's right there on the surface. But Redon didn't paint it that way. Redon's Polyphemus is calm, almost gentle in his expression. There's no boulder raised overhead, no obvious weapon, no aggressive stance. He's simply watching, peaceful, patient. And that's what makes it so much more disturbing. The threat you can see coming is frightening, certainly, but the threat that hides itself, that conceals its true nature behind a mask of calm, that's terrifying. Nicolas Poussin, painting in the 1600s, took an even more peaceful approach. In his landscape with Polyphemus, the giant sits on the mountaintop playing panpipes, a pastoral scene, the Cyclops as shepherd, making music while his flocks graze below, almost romantic. But Redon knew better, or perhaps he understood something darker. He knew that the most dangerous predators don't announce themselves. They don't show their teeth until it's too late. They watch quietly, they wait patiently, they hide their true intentions behind expressions that seem harmless. Now let's look at how another artist, a contemporary of Redon's, painted this exact same subject, because the contrast reveals just how deliberately disturbing Redon's vision was. Gustave Moreau was a fellow symbolist painter, working in Paris at the same time as Redon, and Moreau also painted Galatea, but his version is almost unrecognizable compared to what we've been examining. In Moreau's painting, Galatea is a goddess. There's no other word for it. She's adorned with jewels and ornate decorations. Flowers and elaborate patterns surround her, but they're decorative, not consuming. The entire composition has a Byzantine richness to it, layers of detail and color that create an atmosphere of mystical protection. The Cyclops is present in Moreau's version, yes, but Galatea clearly dominates the composition. She has agency, power, a divine quality that makes her untouchable. The painting feels like a fairy tale, beautiful, ornate, magical. There's no real sense of threat. Even with the Cyclops watching, Galatea seems protected by her own divinity, by the elaborate environment Moreau has created around her. She's in control of this narrative. This was the expected treatment for mythological subjects among the symbolists. Make them beautiful, decorative, transform the raw ancient stories into jeweled visions. Remove the discomfort and replace it with aesthetic pleasure. Redon refused to do that. In Redon's version, Galatea is mortal flesh, completely vulnerable. There are no jewels, no divine protection, no elaborate ornamental environment that suggests safety. She's just a body, sleeping, exposed, unaware. Where Moreau painted a goddess who happened to be watched, Redon painted a victim who doesn't know she's a victim yet. The flowers in Moreau's painting decorate. The flowers in Redon's painting consume. The Cyclops in Moreau's painting is part of an aesthetic composition. The Cyclops in Redon's painting is a predator with blood on his lips. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't Redon simply having a different style. This was a deliberate choice to strip away the safety that mythology provides, to remove the distance that makes ancient stories comfortable. Moreau gave his viewers beauty. Redon gave his viewers horror. Moreau showed what the myth looks like when filtered through centuries of artistic tradition. Redon showed what it actually means. To understand why Redon chose to paint this scene in such a disturbing way, we need to understand something about the artist himself. Not his entire life story, but the formative experiences that shaped his vision. Odilon Redon was born in 1840 in the Bordeaux region of France. He spent his childhood isolated on the family's country estate, far from the city, surrounded by the vast landscapes of southwestern France. The region had its own folklore, stories passed down through generations about giants and strange creatures. Local legends spoke of one-eyed beings who roamed the countryside. These weren't academic myths from Greek textbooks. These were stories that felt real to a child growing up in that isolated place. But there was darker material shaping him as well. Deaths in his family, his mother, his brother, loss that marked him early and permanently. The kind of trauma that makes you see the world differently. That makes you aware of hidden threats, of the fragility of safety, of how quickly peace can be shattered. Redon once wrote about his artistic philosophy, and the quote is revealing. It said, "I want to place the visible at the service of the invisible." What he meant was that he wasn't interested in painting what was obviously there on the surface. He wanted to paint what lurked underneath, the psychological reality beneath the physical appearance, the fear beneath the calm, the threat beneath the beauty. And this painting, the Cyclops, is exactly that philosophy made visible. On the surface, it's a pastoral scene. Beautiful colors, soft forms, a sleeping figure among flowers. But underneath that surface beauty is psychological horror, hidden threat, the invisible made visible through the act of painting. Redon's childhood among folklore and loss, his understanding that danger can hide in familiar landscapes, his conviction that art should reveal hidden truths rather than decorate surfaces, all of it led to this painting. A scene that looks peaceful but feels wrong, that appears beautiful but creates unease. That shows us the moment before violence, not violence itself, because the anticipation is so much more psychologically devastating. This wasn't just Redon painting a myth. This was Redon painting what he understood about the nature of threat, about how danger presents itself, about the gap between what we see and what's actually there. But this painting of the watching Cyclops wasn't an isolated subject for Redon. It was part of a decades-long obsession with eyes, with watching, with the psychological weight of being observed. More than 30 years before he painted the Cyclops, Redon created another image of a watching eye. This one from 1882, titled "The Eye Like a Strange Balloon Mounts Toward Infinity." It's an unsettling image, a giant eyeball rendered in black charcoal, floating in the sky like a hot air balloon. Below it, a tiny landscape. Above it, darkness. And that eye, isolated, disembodied, watching everything below. This was during Redon's Noirs period, his black works, when he created exclusively in charcoal and lithograph, before he discovered color, when his visions were rendered entirely in shadow and light. But even in this earlier, starker form, the obsession is clear. The eye is an entity unto itself. The eye is surveillance. The eye as an inescapable presence that hovers above us, always watching, always aware. Both paintings, separated by 3 decades, ask the same fundamental question. What does it mean to be watched by something you cannot escape? In the earlier work, the eye is literally floating above the landscape, omnipresent, godlike in its ability to see everything. In the Cyclops, the eye belongs to a creature hidden in the mountain, but the psychological effect is the same. You cannot escape its gaze. You cannot hide from something that has positioned itself to see everything. Redon spent his entire career exploring this anxiety, the feeling of being observed, the weight of invisible eyes, the psychological burden of knowing that something is watching, even when you can't see it, watching you. For him, the eye wasn't just an organ, it was a symbol of consciousness itself, of awareness, of the uncomfortable truth that we're never truly alone, never truly unobserved. And the Cyclops represents the culmination of that lifelong exploration. The watching eye given a body, given context, given a specific mythological narrative that makes its threat concrete rather than abstract. This wasn't a random choice of subject matter. This was the natural endpoint of decades spent painting eyes and thinking about what it means to watch and be watched. Throughout his career, Redon returned again and again to creatures that watched and waited. Predators hiding in plain sight. Beings that combined the familiar with the deeply wrong. The Smiling Spider from 1882-1 shows a spider with a human face, not a monstrous face, an almost gentle one. Smiling even, but that smile makes it worse. This is a predator sitting in its web, patient, waiting for prey to arrive. The human face creates an uncanny valley effect. Something that should be human but isn't. Something that understands what it's doing. Cactus Man, also from 1881, shows a human head emerging from a cactus. Nature and human merged in a way that shouldn't be possible. The plant as threat. The organic world made conscious and aware. These black works, these noirs from the 1870s through the 1890s, show a consistent pattern in Redon's imagination. Hidden watchers. Nature as predator. The vulnerability we feel when we realize the world around us might be conscious, might be watching, might have intentions we can't understand or defend against. The Cyclops fits perfectly into this pattern, a being that has merged with the mountain, that watches from concealment, that combines the natural world with conscious intent in a way that creates deep psychological unease. These weren't random nightmare images. They were explorations of a specific kind of fear, the fear that nature isn't neutral, that the landscape has eyes, that what seems safe and familiar might be watching us with purposes we can't comprehend. And that fear, that specific anxiety about hidden watchers in the natural world, runs through decades of Redon's work. The Cyclops is just the most fully realized version of it, the nightmare given mythological weight and narrative context. The Cyclops was painted in 1914, near the end of Redon's life. This places it firmly in his late period after decades of working exclusively in black and white. For most of his career, Redon's nightmares were rendered in charcoal and shadow, pure contrast, darkness and light with nothing in between. Those black works had their own kind of horror, stark, uncompromising, obviously nightmarish. But then he discovered something even more unsettling. Color could make horror worse, not by making things more obviously frightening, but by creating a false sense of safety, by making something look like it should be beautiful, peaceful, pastoral, when underneath it's deeply wrong. Look at the warm tones in the Cyclops, the soft pinks and golds of Galatea's flesh, the gentle purples and greens of the flowers, the golden browns of the mountain. These are colors that should create comfort, that should signal safety and natural beauty. But they don't, because underneath those beautiful colors is a psychological trap. The color makes you want to trust the scene, makes you want to see it as romantic or mythological in the classical sense. Beautiful nymph sleeping among flowers, almost like a fairy tale. And that's exactly what makes it so disturbing. The color lies to you. It promises beauty while delivering horror. It wraps the nightmare in soft, appealing tones that make the underlying threat even more shocking when you finally see it. Redon understood that sometimes the most effective horror doesn't announce itself. It hides behind beauty, behind warmth, behind colors that tell you everything is fine, even as the content shows you it's not. This was a lesson he learned late in his career, but it's what makes the Cyclops so much more psychologically complex than his earlier black works. The nightmare dressed in beautiful colors, the threat wrapped in pastoral softness. This fear that Redon captured, this anxiety about being watched while vulnerable, isn't unique to him. It's something that appears throughout art history, something fundamental to human psychology. More than a century before Redon painted the Cyclops, another artist created a painting that explores the exact same terror. Henry Fuseli's The Nightmare from 1781 shows a woman sleeping on a bed, draped backwards in an unconscious pose. Sitting on her chest is a demon, an incubus, watching her face. And emerging from the darkness behind them, a horse's head with wild eyes. The nightmare made literal, the parallels are striking. A sleeping, vulnerable woman, completely unconscious, defenseless, unaware of what's happening to her. A predatory watcher or watchers. The demon sits directly on her, violating her space. The horse observes from the shadows. A gothic horror atmosphere, dark, threatening, psychological rather than physically violent. And most importantly, the viewer positioned as another voyeur. We're watching this woman in her most vulnerable moment. We're seeing what she cannot see. We're participating in the violation of her unconsciousness. Fuseli set his nightmare in a bedroom, an intimate domestic space invaded by supernatural threat. Redon set his in nature, a pastoral landscape invaded by mythological predator. The settings change, the century changes. The specific cultural context changes, but the fear doesn't change. Being watched while helpless is one of humanity's most primal terrors. The awareness that something might be observing us when we're defenseless, when we cannot see back, when we have no ability to protect ourselves or even know that protection is needed. Fuseli understood this in 1781, Redon understood it in 1914, and we understand it now, looking at both paintings more than a century later. The nightmare persists because the fear is fundamental. It's built into us. This anxiety about unseen watchers, about vulnerability during unconsciousness, about the gap between what we know and what might be true. Both paintings tap into something deeper than their specific narratives, deeper than demons or Cyclops or mythology. They tap into the fear that we're never truly alone, never truly safe, that even in our most private, vulnerable moments, something might be watching. And once that fear takes hold, once you start wondering what might be observing you when you can't see back, it's almost impossible to shake. But why does this painting still disturb us? Why does an image from 1914 depicting a myth thousands of years old still create that visceral sense of unease when we stand before it? Because it's not really about ancient mythology at all. It's about something we experience constantly in our modern world. The feeling of being watched without knowing it. The awareness that observation is happening beyond our control or consent. Think about the cameras on every street corner, the ones in stores, in office buildings, recording constantly, watching everyone who passes through their field of vision. Most of the time we don't even notice them anymore, but they're there, always watching. Think about our phones, the websites that track every click, the apps that monitor our location, the algorithms that study our behavior, learning our patterns, predicting our desires. We've become accustomed to being observed by systems we can't see and don't fully understand. Think about social media. The way we're constantly aware that anything we post might be seen by anyone. That someone could be looking at our profiles right now, studying our photos, reading our photos, reading our words, learning about us without our knowledge. The Cyclops hiding behind the mountain, watching Galatea sleep, isn't really about ancient Greece. It's about the fundamental anxiety of modern life. The knowledge that we're being observed constantly by forces we can't see and can't control. Redon painted this before surveillance cameras, before the internet, before smartphones and social media. But he understood the psychology, the discomfort of knowing that eyes might be on us at any moment, that someone or something might be watching, studying, learning, while we remain completely unaware. And that's why the painting still works. Why it still creates that crawling sensation on the back of your neck. Because the technology changes, but the feeling doesn't. The anxiety about unseen watchers is universal and timeless. Every time you wonder if someone can see you through your webcam. Every time you feel watched in a public space but can't identify who's looking. Every time you realize how much data exists about you, collected and analyzed by systems you've never seen. You're feeling what Galatea would feel if she woke up and saw that eye watching from above. The fear is ancient, but it's also completely contemporary. And that's what makes this painting so enduringly unsettling. Let's return one more time to the Cyclops' face, to that expression that's so difficult to define but so central to why this painting disturbs us. It's not anger, it's not rage. It's not the expression of someone lost in obsessive passion or burning with jealousy. There's something almost playful about it, that slight suggestion of a smile. The corners of the mouth turned up just enough to suggest awareness, amusement even, and that expression tells us everything we need to know about this creature's psychology. He's not ashamed of what he's doing. He's not concerned about being caught. When he turns his gaze from Galatea to us, to the viewers who have discovered him hiding behind the mountain, his expression doesn't change to guilt or fear. Instead, there's that smile, that knowing look. Oopsie, you caught me. But I'm not stopping. This is the expression of someone who knows exactly what he's doing and feels no moral conflict about it. Someone who finds this entertaining, who sees nothing wrong with hours of secret watching, who views Galatea not as a person with autonomy, but as something that exists for his observation and eventual possession. And the lack of shame is somehow more disturbing than obvious threat would be. A monster showing its teeth, displaying obvious aggression, at least gives you something concrete to fear. You know what you're dealing with. The threat is explicit. But this calm smile, this patient, amused watching, this suggests something worse. A predator so confident in its power that it doesn't even try to hide its intentions once discovered. Someone who knows that being seen doesn't change anything, that the watching will continue, but that eventually he'll have what he wants. The smile implies continuation. It says, this isn't over. You've seen me now, yes. You know what I'm doing, but that changes nothing. I'll still be here when you leave. Still watching, still waiting. And perhaps what makes this most unsettling is how familiar that expression feels. Not because we've been the Cyclops, but because many of us have been Galatea. Have encountered that look on someone's face when they realize they've been caught doing something inappropriate, but feel no shame about it. The person who keeps staring even after you notice. Who doesn't look away when caught? Who meets your eyes with that same slight smile that says they know you've seen them and they don't care? That expression exists in the real world, and Redon captured it perfectly in this mythological giant's face. That knowing, shameless awareness, that patient confidence that comes from having all the power in the situation. It's the look of someone who knows you can't stop them, and who finds your awareness of that fact amusing. There's one final uncomfortable truth about this painting that we need to confront. One last layer of disturbance that Redon built into this image. We spent the last minutes examining Galatea in detail, analyzing her vulnerable pose, studying the flowers that grow around her body, discussing her defenselessness, her complete unawareness, the way she's been positioned in the composition. We've looked at every detail of her sleeping form, examined the way the light falls on her flesh, considered the symbolic meaning of her absorption into the landscape. And in doing all of that, we've been doing exactly what the Cyclops is doing. Watching someone who cannot watch us back. Studying someone who has no idea they're being observed. Spending extended time examining a vulnerable, unconscious figure who never consented to this attention. Redon has trapped us, made us complicit, turned us into participants in the very act we claim to find disturbing. We cannot view this painting without following the Cyclops' gaze, without looking where he's looking, without studying what he's studying. The composition forces us into his position, makes us see through his eyes. And every time we look at Galatea, every time we examine the details of her vulnerability, we're performing the same act of voyeurism that makes the Cyclops disturbing. The act of viewing is the act being depicted. And once you realize that, once you understand how thoroughly Redon has positioned you as another watcher, another pair of eyes focused on this sleeping, unaware figure, the painting becomes even more disturbing, because it forces you to examine your own relationship with watching, with observation, with the consumption of images of vulnerability. It asks uncomfortable questions about what it means to look, about the power dynamics inherent in the simple act of viewing. The Cyclops watches Galatea, we watch them both, and somewhere in that chain of observation, somewhere in that series of eyes looking at bodies that cannot look back, lies a truth about human nature that we'd rather not acknowledge. We are all watchers. We all participate in this. And art, perhaps, is one of the places where that uncomfortable truth becomes impossible to ignore.